Hello, we're back here with Hao. We're
Yep.
going to continue reading C.S. Lewis.
Yep.
We're on chapter 4, which is what? Human wickedness. Okay, finally.
Correct.
Do you want to start the reading?
Okay. You can have no greater sign of confirmed pride than when you think you are humble enough. The example is given in the last chapter one to show that love may cause pain to its object, but only on the suppositions that the object needs alteration to become fully lovable. Now, why do we men need so much alteration? The Christians answered that we have used our free will to become very bad. It's so well known that it hardly needs to be stated. But to bring this doctrine into real life in the minds of modern men, even modern Christians, is very hard. When the apostles preached, they could assume, even in their pagan hearers, a real consciousness of deserving the divine anger. The pagan mysteries existed to to ally this consciousness, and the Epicurean philosophy claimed to deliver men from the fear of eternal punishment. It was against this background that the gospel appeared as good news. It brought news of possible healing to men who knew that they were mortally ill. But all this has changed. Christianity now has preached the diagnosis. It is so very bad news before it can win a hearing for the cure. Do you want anything special or to just keep moving?
Well, just that seems pretty simple to me, but what do you think what do you think is the important stuff there?
Um, we could just reiterating what was talked about in the previous chapter that
Mhm.
to become I don't I don't know if this is the exact idea from last chapter, but it's the idea but the concept that to become fully lovable you need alteration.
Mhm. But I think what's interesting here is the fact that he brings up that pagans kind of knew this better than modern people knew this.
How
And
so?
that's well, in that in pagan philosophy, it was very obvious that humans were flawed in some way, right?
Really? I thought I would like if I were to read like if I was I guess in my opinion like if I knew some knowledge of Christianity I would think that Christians knew it pretty well, right?
Well, Christians knew, but pre-Christians. So when it's saying pagans, it means like the Greeks
Yeah,
or people who were worshiping other gods and stuff
yeah,
like that. And so, in a sense, the way you can think of what can define a pagan religion is somebody who realizes this problem,
yeah. Hmm.
this incompleteness,
Yeah.
but they search for the answer inside the world somehow,
Oh, okay.
right? So they say, okay, well, the problem is I'm wrong in some way. So how is this going to fix it? I'm going
They
to
look
fix
for
it by like the government or something like that, right?
I see.
That's a way you can think of paganism. And so Lewis and Tolkien, both of them, were very much stressed this idea that maybe the modern world is going to have to go back to pagan before it can go back to Christian.
Oh, okay.
Do you see what I mean?
I see.
And because modern man is a little bit different, but so we can continue.
There are two principal causes. One is the fact that for about 100 years, we have so concentrated on one of the virtues, kindness or mercy, that most of us do not feel anything except kindness to be really good or anything but cruelty to be really bad. Such lopsided ethical developments are not uncommon, and other ages too have had their pet virtues and curious insensibilities. And if one virtue must be cultivated at the expense of all the rest, none has a higher claim than mercy. For every Christian must reject detest, detestation that convert the covert propaganda for cruelty, which tries to drive mercy out of the world by calling its name such as humanitarianism and sentimentality. The real trouble is that kindness is a quality fatally easy to attribute to ourselves on quite inadequate grounds. Everyone feels benevolent if nothing happens to be annoying him at the moment. Thus, a man easily comes to console himself for all his other vices by a conviction that his heart's in the right place, and he wouldn't hurt a fly, though in fact he has never made a slightest sacrifice for a fellow creature. We think we are kind when we are only happy. it is not so easy on the same grounds to imagine one so temperate, chaste, or humble.
Chase.
Chase Hopper. So let's talk about this part here.
Yeah,
Is separating. He's trying to separating what is kindness and what is simply this idea of being happy equals kindness. Is that what I'm saying?
I guess, yeah. So he's saying, so what's the reason that we forgot that we're sinful in the first place and that we need to be corrected? So the pagans understood that we needed to be corrected, but they didn't understand that it was through Christ.
Okay.
And so, but modern man doesn't even understand that he needs to be corrected in some way. And so Lewis is saying there's two big reasons for that. But the first one is that for the past few hundred years or so, we've very much focused on kindness and mercy as like the main virtue. So it seems like a God that does those kind of rash, horrible things is not kind or merciful, right?
Yes.
And we think that we don't need to be corrected because we seem to be getting along fine, right? Like most people are doing fine in the modern first world, right?
Yeah.
They have food, like what are you gonna do? Oh, I have food. What's wrong with what I'm doing? I'm not going out hurting people. Why
Hmm.
do I need to be corrected?
Oh, I see. It's simply a state of being fine does not be equal a state of does bring forth the idea that you don't necessarily need any changes. Yeah.
Yeah. And and kind, and people think they're kind, but they're very, very rarely do they actually have to sacrifice for another person
And it's just
because so
like yeah,
many people are
yeah.
so abundant anyway.
And it's like this being kind is almost like some people think of it just inaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like there's a famous phrase that Nietzsche has that I think is really powerful. Where he goes, people think he was criticizing Christians with this because he was probably seeing the beginnings of this part of Christianity rise. But he was saying that these something like along the lines of these sheep think that they are virtuous because they have no claws, right?
No
So a sheep,
claws.
so a
Oh,
sheep,
okay. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, a sheep has no claws,
Yeah.
right? So he can't hurt anybody. And so the sheep builds this morality where being a kind person and
Uh,
not hurting anybody is a good thing, but they don't have claws, so they can't hurt anybody anyway. So it's not. So Nietzsche's basically saying Christianity is a morality for weak people to justify their position in the world.
so it's kind of like what Jordan Peterson sometimes talk about that you don't know how good can you be not knowing how you can't know how good you can be knowing not knowing how bad you can be,
Yeah,
which
that's
I
a
do
big part of
like.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's continue.
The second cause is the effect of psychoanalysis on the public mind, and in particular the doctrine of repressions and inhibitions. Whenever these doctrines really mean Whatever these doctrines really mean, the impression they have actually left on most people is that the sense of shame is a dangerous and mischievous thing. We have labored to overcome that sense of shrinking, the desire to conceal, which either nature herself or or the tradition of almost all mankind has attached to cowardice, unchastity, falsehood, and envy. We're told to get things out in the open, not for the sake of humiliation, but on the grounds that these things are very natural and we need not be ashamed of them. But unless Christianity is wholly false, the perception of ourselves which we have in moments of shame must have must have be the only true one. And even pagan society has usually recognized shamelessness as the nadir of the
Nadir. I don't know what that word means actually. I'm gonna look it up.
yeah.
Continue though.
In trying to extirpate, I don't know what that is.
Extirpate.
Extirpate shame, we have broken down one of the um ramparts
Rampart. Yeah.
of the human spirit, madly exulting in the work as the Trojans exulted when they broke their walls and put a horse into Troy. I do not know that there is anything to be done, but to set about the rebuilding as soon as we can. It is mad. It is mad work to remove hypocrisy by removing the temptation to hypocrisy. The frankness of people sunk below shame is a very cheap frankness.
Mm.
This is you get this part?
Yeah, so now you've okay, I just looked up the word nadir, by the way, and it means, what it says here is the lowest point in the fortunes of a person or organization. So
Lowest point.
shame shameless what does it say? Shamelessness is the nadir of the soul. So if whatever you do, you have no shame in what you're doing, that's the lowest point you can be.
Okay.
Because what it essentially means is you have no standards for yourself,
Okay.
right? So in a now there are some I don't know like the actual like situation that was going on, but you've heard things like in psychology or pop psychology where people will be like, "Oh, if you have this desire and society tells you to repress it, right? That's a shameful thing to have. Then if you repress it, it causes other like weird psychological things." And this is like in like
Void.
Freud's
Yep.
weird stuff, you know,
Yep.
that a lot of like these disorders or psychological disorders are because people are repressing natural things, right?
Yep.
I mean, but it's kind of based on a so are you saying that basically, are you saying these people saying that all natural, you know, instincts are just good, like they're always good? Because that's clearly not true, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so um so there's a temptation to remove shame, or if the first level of the first like instinctual level that something is wrong is if you feel shame for something. So if there's a whole group of people that are trying to say we should no longer feel shame is not a good uh, guiding emotion to tell us what to do, then
Okay.
people are going to think there's nothing wrong with them, right?
I mean, that depends on what it is, right?
Yeah, yeah, I suppose most people don't want to get rid of all possible shames. Well, but if you think about the way that like mob justice works nowadays, right? Nowadays, that if people want people to feel no shame at all,
That's
and then
not
as soon
shame
as
though.
some, what do you mean?
But like, well, let's say like if I've like the type of shame that when it comes to mob justice, it's more fear, not shame.
Okay,
Because let's replace the word for a second, right? Let's say I feel ashamed. I feel ashamed that these people are calling me out or whatever, right? I think most scenarios nowadays they're not feeling shameful because not because they feel that they're doing something wrong, but rather it's something that they just felt they're afraid to do. That's why they don't do it anymore.
oh yeah, I know, but the people who, whenever someone does say something that the mob doesn't like,
Okay.
right? That's usually what it's called, is shaming that person. We should
Yes.
shame that person for
Okay.
their beliefs, right?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you just have to start shaming shame, you know? As if there's going to be any standards whatsoever, shame is going to show up. Shame is the emotion of recognizing that other people see you as below the standard.
And it doesn't matter what if it's right or wrong standard. It's just a standard, right?
Yeah. So it's not like Lewis is saying shame is like whenever you feel shame, that's like you
you
know
know
you're
it's very
wrong.
well. Yeah.
But having no concept of shame whatsoever is also dangerous because then people think that they're right in whatever they do, which is not true.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, we can continue.
A recovery of all sense of sin is essential to Christianity. Okay. Christ takes it for granted that men are bad until we really feel for this assumption of his to be true. That we are part of the world he came to save. We are not part of the audience to whom his words are addressed. We lack the first condition to understand for understanding what he is talking about. And when men attempt to be Christians without this preliminary consciousness of sin, the result is almost bound to be uncertain resentment against God, as to one always explicitly, explicable, and inexplicably angry. Most of us had at times felt a secret sympathy with the dying farmer who replied to Vicar's dissertation on response by asking, "What harm have I done to him? Have I done him? There is no real rub. The worst we have done to God is to have him to leave him alone. Why can't he return to the compliment? Why not live and let live?" What call has he of all beings to be angry? It's easy for him to be good.
Yeah. Now, yeah. So you see, you've probably heard like popular sentiment. Like, I don't think I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to some people in a Discord server that I'm in for
Mm-hmm.
Paul Vanderklay's videos, and something came up where on there's some like atheist commentators who will say, even if God was real, right?
Yep.
Like this is like Hitchens or something like that will say, even if God was real, why should I worship him? Because look at all the terrible things he does. Because makes kids have cancer and he makes wars happen and this and that and the other, right?
Yep.
And what are they missing is the idea that maybe those people deserve correction in some way, right? They need correction.
Yes. I guess the objection would be it would be such a harsh objection to have cancer.
What do you mean?
It would be such a harsh objection or alteration to have cancer.
Oh yeah. Or well, usually it's like they'll say it to like an innocent child. Like, why would that correct?
Yeah.
Why would that have to hit an innocent child? Yeah,
Yeah.
true. And that's a little bit. I don't think it would be. It's nothing so clear cut as the child did like
Yeah.
disobeyed their parents, so God gave the child cancer.
That
That's
would be very weird. Yeah.
yeah. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Okay. Yeah.
Now, at the moment when a man feels real guilt, moment too rare in our lives, all these blasphemies vanish away. Much which may fail can be excused to human infirmities, but not this incredibly mean and ugly action which none of our friends would have done, which even such a thorough-going little rotter as X would have been ashamed of, which we would not for the world allow to be published, such as the moment. At such a moment, we really do know that our character, as revealed in this action, is and ought to be hateful to all good men. And if there are power above men, to them, a God who is not regarded us with an appeasable distance would not be a good thing. We cannot even wish for such a God. It is like wishing that every nose in the universe were abolished, that smell of hay or roses or the sea should never again delight any creature, because our own breath happens to stink. This is okay. Explain that to me. I kind of lost it.
He's basically saying he's just describing what the emotion of guilt is like. Like when you feel guilt, you really, really feel that what you just did should never be done again by anyone, and that all good men should hate what you did, right?
Yeah,
So, and too rarely we feel guilt because there's probably more times that we do things and think that we did the right thing than times that we did the right thing and think we did the wrong thing.
yeah. That
Some
makes sense.
people have the opposite thing where they feel too guilty for just doing normal things, which is another wrong thing. But that's probably rarer, but it
Like
also
vegans,
who?
vegans.
Oh, maybe, maybe that's a little bit more complicated though.
Yeah, right. When we merely say that we are bad, the wrath of God seems to be a barbarous doctrine. As soon as we perceive our badness, it appears inevitable, a mere corollary from God's goodness, to keep ever before us the insight derived from such a moment as I have been describing. To learn to detect the same real inexcusable corruption under more and more of its complex disguises is therefore indispensable to a real understanding of the Christian faith. This is not, of course, a new doctrine. I am attempting nothing very splendid in this chapter. I'm merely trying to get my reader over a subnorum.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I don't know what that. To take the first step, our fool's paradise and other illusion, but the illusion has grown in modern times so strong that I must add a few we tending considerations tending to make the reality less incredible. We are deceived by looking on the outside of things. We suppose ourselves to be roughly not much worse than why, whom all acknowledge for a decent sort of person. And certainly, though we should not claim it out loud, better than abominable acts,
You just
even
think
on
like other people that we would know, you
yeah,
know.
even on the superficial level, we are probably deceived about this. Don't be too sure that your friends think you're as good as Y. The very fact that you selected him for the comparison is suspicious. He is probably the head and shoulders above you in your circle, but let us suppose that Y and yourself both appear not bad. How far Y's appearance is deceptive is between Y and God. He may not be deceptive. You know that your is. Does this seem to you a mere trick? Because I could say the same to Y and to every man in turn. But that is just the point. Every man, not very holy or very arrogant, has to live up to the outward appearance of other men. He knows that he knows there is that within him which falls far below even his most careless public behavior, even his loosest talk. In an instant, in an instant of time, while your friend hesitate for a word, what things pass through your mind? We have never told the whole truth. We may confess ugly facts, the meanings, the meanest cowardice, or the shabbiest, and most prosaic impurity. But the tone is false. The very act of confessing, and infinitely, infinitesimally,
Infinitesimal is the opposite of an infinite. It's infinitely small as
okay,
possibly can be.
infinitesimally hypocritical glance, a dash of humor. All this contrives to dissociate the fact from your very self. No one could guess how familiar and, in a sense, conjunctural to your soul these things were. How much of a piece with all the rest down there, in the dreaming inner warmth. They struck no such discordant notes. Were not only nearly so odd and detachable from the rest of you, as that they seem when they are turned into words. We imply and often believe that habitual vices are exceptional single facts, and make the opposite mistake about virtues. Like the bad tennis player who calls his normal form his bad days, and mistakes his rare success for his normal. I do not think it is our fault that we cannot tell the truth of ourselves. The persistent, lifelong inner murmur of spite, jealousy,
Brutal.
prurience,
I don't know what that is actually.
yeah, greed, and self-complacence simply will not go into words. But the important thing is that we should not make a mistake. We should not mistake our inevitably limited utterance for a full account of the words that is inside.
Hmm.
That's way too much.
But I think it's a pretty simple point, but it's a very, very important point, right?
I'm missing that point.
It's, well, we'll go back to the first sentence. We are deceived by looking on the outside of things,
So
right?
he's saying that we're appealing how other men's look.
Or it's a lot of well, if you say, oh, well, there's Y over there, and Y is not that bad, right? So
Uh,
think of, this is sometimes you've watched like 90 Day Fiance, 90 Day Fiance?
I think I know what it is. It's like a scam show where these girls
Yeah,
scam
it's
these
something
guys.
like that. Yeah, it's something like that. And you'll watch that show and you'll go like, oh, like she's scamming him over,
He is
or
such a
he's
jerk.
like some idiot, right?
Yeah.
Who's just doing stupid things. And you watch the show and you go like, or a lot of like TLC shows are very much like this. Like people in
Yeah.
weird conditions doing very weird things, like
It's
obviously,
a free specialty.
yeah, they're obviously like self-destructive or like they're hurting other people. And you can watch these shows and everyone can watch it and be like, what like stupid things do they do? Like it's insane. They have no self-control. They can't even control like
Yeah, yeah.
basic functions or whatever. And so this is like the X that he's talking about here. We know that we're better than them, right?
Yep.
So we go,
Okay.
okay, well, I'm better than them, right?
Yep.
But are you, but like sometimes you go, are you really better than them? Sometimes maybe you're like that sheep where you would do,
Ah, I
but
see. I
you
see.
just
I see.
don't do it because you don't have the claws, right?
I see what you're saying. It's exactly the point that he was making earlier, basically.
Yeah,
Like
it's
we,
similar.
we don't do evil not because we're good. We don't do evil because we're not capable of doing evil. We don't have the
Well,
capacity.
sometimes you're not in the right conditions, right?
Exactly.
Like and that's close to the Peterson point where he goes, we all look back on Nazi Germany now and be like,
Exactly.
I would have been Schindler, I would have rescued like all the Jews.
No, we don't
Like,
do
no,
that thing.
you probably would not have been Schindler.
Yeah. I should make a video about that, but okay.
Yeah, go ahead. But yeah, and then like why is like some guy where we go like you like most people you can look at them and you'd be like, oh, I'm kind of like on par with them, you
Hmm.
know. But in reality, maybe that because their outward appearance, you don't know if it's true, if it reflects their inner appearance or
In the
not.
thoughts, yep.
But what Lewis is saying is, you know that your outward appearance doesn't reflect your inner
You
appearance,
know your
right?
own self, yeah.
Yeah. So you know that at least you're lying.
Yeah.
Maybe everyone else is lying too, and maybe we're all confused. So at the very least, since we know that our outward appearance isn't what other people should base their opinion on, we
Hmm.
shouldn't base our opinion of others on their outward appearance either.
I see. So if we since we don't know what ourselves we don't
Since
know
we
ourselves
lie to
better.
others, they're probably lying to us, so we shouldn't compare ourselves like that. Doesn't mean we shouldn't trust other people like
I think I really want to figure out like concrete this thing because it's so important actually. I really like it. Like
Mhm.
like it's almost like we don't know it ourselves enough. Why and we somehow tends to think that other people know themselves enough that they're good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I see. I like that a lot actually. It's kind of like yeah, we have it. Okay, a reaction. In
Okay.
itself, wholesome is now going on against purely private and domestic conceptions of morality, a reawakening of social conscience. We feel ourselves to be involved in critics,
Iniquitous.
iniquitous social system and to share a corporate guilt. This is very true, but the enemy can exploit even true style exception. Be aware lest you are making use idea of corporate guilt to distract your attention from those humdrum, old-fashioned guilts of your own which have nothing to do with the system and which can be dealt with without waiting for the millennium. For the corporate guilt perhaps cannot be, and certainly is not, felt with the same forces as personal guilt for most of us, as we now are. This conception is a merely excuse for evading the real issue. When we have fully learned how to know our individual corruption, then indeed we can go on to think of the corporate guilds and hardly think of it too much. But we must learn to walk before we run. I
Mm.
think so. This is the corporate guilds is talking about. I'm in my understanding, it's talking about the environmental things that's forcing you to commit this small corruptions.
Yeah, but it's not just environmental. I'd say it's like social.
Yeah,
So,
so your environment surrounding you, basically.
but your social environment more specifically.
Oh, okay. But then he's talking about don't even worry about that. This situation where you know that you are committing this without the influence of the whatever social situation around you.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's
And
trying
it's
to
like Gandhi, right? What is the famous Gandhi quote?
uh,
Be the change you want to see in the world.
be the king he would want to see in the
Be
world.
the change you want to see in the world, right?
Well, he was a anti-Semite, I thought.
Gandhi?
Yeah.
Okay, well maybe he should have changed. Well, he didn't want to see that change in the world.
No, I think he was
I don't know about that.
the peaceful, but I think he did say some pretty nasty stuff about Jewish people.
That's possible, and if so, that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
But the I'll just complain about this real quick. I just read an article recently
Hmm.
in this one journal about how Tolkien used anti-Semitic tropes in The Hobbit. Terrible article. It was a terrible,
Is
terrible
it
article.
about the dwarves being Jewish?
Yeah. But it was a terrible article. But we can continue and we can continue.
Okay. We
But
have a strange. We have a
no,
strange.
no. Well, I wanted to
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
about this a little bit. So this reminds me very much too of Rousseau, right? Who was another philosopher,
Okay.
and he said things like, "Oh yeah, like the like, oh, society, after we developed, like at a certain level we've developed, and now everything is based on trade, right? So
Mhm.
Rousseau said, oh, so the only way that we can do things in the world is if we have to trade. So we basically have to lie to one another, and we have to be two-faced. This is what society has conditioned us to do. And he's like,
Yep.
so terrible that we have to be two-faced and we can't be honest and all this stuff. And then you go, Rousseau, actually you can be honest. You know, there's nothing stopping you from being honest in the world. And I guess he's saying something like, oh, we have to lie about what we feel in order to like get things from other people because we're dependent on other people
That's not true.
economically. But that's not entirely true, Rousseau, because the world can change. So William James has this great thing about Rousseau where he goes, Rousseau would always like go like, oh, like a child is better raised like by the mother at home, like teaching them the
Uh,
things of at home, and then like grow and they move out, and now they all have to. And then William James goes like, well, Rousseau, you know, like you could have done that, but you sent all your kids to boarding school because you didn't want to deal with them. You know, like if you think homeschooling is so great, Rousseau,
Wait,
why
did that
didn't you do
conversation is a real conversation?
no, Rousseau died like 100 years before.
Oh,
But
but it was just a critique of him. Okay.
yeah, he's just saying a lot of people that say things like that are like sentimentalists. They're not really like,
Yeah.
well, you know, Lewis just told us not to use the word sentimentalist. I don't know, maybe that's bad, maybe it's good, I don't know.
I
But
don't think it matters, but I
Rousseau
like
was very
the
much like,
idea of it.
oh, like we're all trapped by society. Like society tells us everything we can do. And a little bit, but not that much.
I do it. I disagree with Lewis, but we can continue. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Well, we'll continue.
We have a strange illusion that mere time cancels sin. I have heard, or others, I have heard myself recounting cruelties and falsehoods committed in boyhood as if they were no concern of the present speakers, and even with laughter. But mere time does nothing either to the fact or the guilt of a sin. The guilt is washed out not only by time, but by repentance in the blood of Christ. If we have repented these early sins, we should remember the price of our forgiveness and be humble. As for the fact of a sin, is it probable that anything cancels it? All times are eternally present to God. Is it not at least possible that along some line, along one line of his multi-dimensional eternity, he sees you forever in the nursery, pulling the wing off a fly, forever today lying and lusting as a schoolboy, forever in that moment of cowardice or insolence of a subaltern.
As a subaltern. I'm not sure what that is.
It may be that salvation consists not in the canceling of these eternal moments, but in the perfected humanity that bears the shame forever, rejoicing in the occasion which it furnished to God's compassion, and glad that it would be common knowledge to the universe. Perhaps in that eternal moment, St. Peter, you will forgive me if I'm wrong, forever denies his master. If so, it would indeed be true that the joys of heaven are for most of us. In our present condition, an acquired taste in certain ways of life may render the taste impossible of acquisition. Perhaps the loss of those who dare not go such a public place. Of course, I do not know that this is true, but I think the possibility is worth keeping in mind. Something about sin.
That you could just say that about the whole chapter.
Yeah.
But it's like when I was 3 years old, I took one of those like, you know, those like big plastic screwdrivers
Hmm.
that you can use to like screw in these big screws as a kid.
Yeah.
I stabbed Jimmy Pavone in the eye.
Jimmy Bone.
Jimmy Pavone, who's a neighbor of mine who went to the same nursery school.
You joking, right?
No, I stabbed him in the eye with one of those. 'Cause I remember this. I remember it, and I was just standing there,
And then what happened?
and he was sitting in front of me, and then I saw his eye, and I was holding a screwdriver, and I just put it in his eye.
Did he come out blind?
No,
The
but I remember it. But then I felt guilt afterwards, right? But we can talk about that now and laugh, you know.
I did a terrible thing, not towards a human being, but there was a chick that was like a chick that was running around on the farm, not a farm, but like someone's this house, and then he has in the backyard, maybe his farm's like walking, his chick is walking around, and then one of his smaller chickens is like walked out his little backyard, and then it's next to the edges of a pond, right? So I like to scare chickens because just mess around as a kid, and I started scaring the chicken, and then in the little chicken, it didn't know where to run. It jumped into the pond, and I think it just drowned.
Okay, well, you know,
Yeah,
yeah, pulling the wings off a fly. I did that 2 nights ago.
to
I
pull the
found this
wings
little
off a fly.
mosquito and I just ripped its legs off.
Are you able to? Are you one of those people? Are you able to let the insects go if you don't have to kill it?
No, I usually they try to get away from me and I chase them.
Oh, if it's like a pest, I kill them. But if it's like unnecessary, like killing, I just let them go. If in the room.
No, I search them out actively to kill them.
So are you the one of those people that lay? Oh, I did this too when I was young. I would lay out like a really sugary cracker,
Yeah,
and then all the ants would come out, and I just pour the water on them.
yeah, yeah. Wait, I tweeted about it actually. I tweeted pictures of it. Let me pull it up.
Yeah, because back then it was like, you know, when I was in China, the ants would come out of nowhere sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Here you go.
There's a mosquito flying around the house with a piece of dust attached to his leg, so I grabbed him by his legs and slammed his leg.
And then I found it, and then I fought him, and then I found this. I
Where
found
is it?
his leg.
Oh my god!
Yeah, it was a big mosquito, and I had a big piece of dust hanging off of it.
Oh my goodness! You
Yeah,
killed the
see
you
how
killed
it's
the rape boss.
you see that there? The dust?
I see it.
Yeah.
You killed the rape boss.
Yeah, or something like that. Okay. Um, yeah.
What? You want to start reading?
Yeah, I'll do number 4 and then we'll stop after number 4 because the 4 is
Oh
the
my
long.
god, this is long. Yep.
Okay, I'll read the whole thing and then we'll talk about it. We'll see if I
Yep.
can do the whole thing. Okay. We must guard against the feeling that there is safety in numbers. It is natural to feel that if all men are as bad as the Christians say, then badness must be very excusable. If all the boys plow in the examination, surely the papers must have been too hard. And so the masters at that school feel till they learn that there are other schools where 90% of the boys pass on the same papers. Then they begin to suspect that the fault did not lie with the examiners. Again, many of us have had the experience of living in some local pocket of human society, some particular school, college, regiment, or profession where the tone was bad. And inside that pocket, certain actions were regarded as merely normal. Everyone does it. And certain others as impracticably virtuous and quixotic. That happened to Lewis actually, because he went to a boarding school where the boys were like very, very mean towards each other and they were very like
And he
abusive.
became mean.
Hmm?
And he became mean along with them.
Well, I don't think he was like one of the worst of them, but he probably participated a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was like you can like some of those boys are probably just like, yeah, everybody like does this. So,
Yeah.
but when we emerged from that bad society, we made the horrible discovery that in the outer world, our normal was the kind of thing that no decent person ever dreamed of doing, and our quixotic was taken for granted as the minimum standard of decency. What had seemed to us morbid and fantastic scruples so long as we were in the pocket now turned out to be the only moments of sanity we there enjoyed. It is wise to face the possibility that the whole human race, being a small thing in the universe, is in fact just such a local pocket of evil, an isolated bad school or regiment inside which minimum decency passes for heroic virtue and utter corruption for pardonable imperfection. But is there any evidence, except Christian doctrine itself, that this is so? I am afraid there is. In the first place, there are those odd people among us who do not accept the local standard, who demonstrate the alarming truth that a quite different behavior is, in fact, possible. Worse still, there is the fact that these people, even when separated widely in space and time, have a suspicious knack of agreeing with one another in the main, almost as if they were in touch with some larger public opinion outside the pocket. What is common to Zarathustra, Jeremiah, Socrates, Gautama, Christ, and Marcus Aurelius is something pretty substantial. Okay, interesting footnote here. He goes, I mentioned the incarnate God among human teachers to emphasize the fact that the principal difference between him and them lies not in ethical teaching, which is here my concern, but in person and office. Okay,
Wait. So what's the common thing just between these people?
that they all had a sense of a higher morality that was largely the same in a lot of ways, actually.
Okay.
Okay. Thirdly, we find ourselves even now a theoretical approval of this behavior which no one practices. Even inside the pocket, we do not say that justice, mercy, fortitude, and temperance are of no value, but only that the local custom is as just, brave, temperate, and merciful as can reasonably be expected. It begins to look as if the neglected school rules, even inside this bad school, were connected with some larger world, and that when the term ends, we might find ourselves facing the public opinion of that larger world. But the worst of all is this: we cannot help seeing that the only degree of virtue which we now regard as impracticable can possibly save our race from disaster even on this planet. The standard, which seems to have come into the pocket from outside, turns out to be terribly relevant to conditions inside the pocket. So relevant that a consistent practice of virtue by the human race, even for 10 years, would fill the earth from pole to pole with peace, plenty, health, merriment, and heart's ease, and that nothing else will. It may be the custom down here to treat the regimental rules as a dead letter or a counsel of perfection, but even now, everyone who stops to think can see that when we meet the enemy, this neglect is going to cost every man of us his life. It is then that we shall envy the morbid person, the pedant or enthusiast, who really has taught his company to shoot and dig in and spare their water bottles.
That's a mouthful.
Does that make sense? What do you think?
What do you think?
I buy it. I like it.
What though? I don't think there's a singular point in this.
Well, so what do you think the point of that is? What do you get out of it?
It is because how we have these societal roles, even though they're not be the best roles, they're being because they're simply being accepted by people. They're just simply spreading.
Well, I don't think he's so much talking about the fact that there are like negative things that spread, which is quite obvious. It's more that okay, think of it not in terms of a school, but in terms of like a family. So there's a family where the dad is like a drunk or something like that,
Okay.
and the mom is very abusive, and the older brother is evil, or and the older sister is mean, and you're just like the younger sibling, right? You can say something like, "Oh, well, you didn't know any better," right? So this is like dysfunctional is the normal. Things are always going wrong. Things are always painful, annoying. People get
Yep.
angry. People fight. People get hurt. You lose money. You go hungry, or something like that. And this is
Yep.
the normal to you, right? And then then you get a scholarship out of nowhere, and you go to college, and then everyone is acting like more polite. They're not perfect people either, but they're better, right?
Yep.
They're more normal, and
Better
then
than high school.
it's better than what?
High school.
Yeah, I guess something like that. And then you go, oh well, that world was like awful, and all the moments that were really good are just normal now, right?
Yeah.
So like I've been watching Trailer Park Boys, the TV show, which is a great show. And like if you grew up in that trailer park, you could go like, oh well, you didn't know any better, right?
This is
Ricky grew up
great.
in the trailer park. What?
And they're like, this is great. This is my life.
Yeah, exactly. And then and so what Lewis is saying is someone can say, oh well, maybe just all of humanity altogether is just one very dysfunctional family.
Uh, we're
Can't
just so
necessarily
used
say
to
that.
this. They don't see anything bigger.
Yeah. But he's saying, well, first of all, some people do see something bigger, right?
Yep.
And so we should listen to that. He doesn't really say so much what to do about like the dysfunctional families or dysfunctional schools or pockets,
Yeah.
but he says that just because it's no excuse really,
No.
you know,
Yeah.
doesn't excuse bad behavior.
Yeah, that's
And then
good.
it's very interesting here that, okay, this footnote about Jesus, where he lists all these people who see something bigger, including Christ, right? And then he says, I'm not listing him among them to say that he's just an ethical teacher. I'm actually listing him among them to say he is similar to them as an ethical teacher on some grounds, but he's actually greater.
To
He
them.
wouldn't put them all on a list of gods or something like that, but he will put them all on a list of ethical teachers because
He's the Zeus
he's
among
what?
gods. He's the Zeus among gods.
He's the god among gods.
Okay.
He's the king among kings. So, yeah, we can end there for now.
Dude, these are really long, dude.
What is?
These like chapters are so much harder than the initial ones.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Well, I think we were just spending more time on those, but any other thoughts so far? This one has been pretty simple. This chapter is pretty simple.
I agree with I agree with that because I can see what exactly what it's saying.
Yeah.
I because I am not I am very like I can I agree with the idea of like the environmental effects on people. Yeah, that type
Yeah.
of arguments is pretty strong
Mm-hmm.
because like even if those people who makes it out to be different, they are like on the low, they are the like on the standard deviation, they're the outliers.
Who is the outlier?
Those people who make it on the standard deviation, they are the outliers.
Yeah, but the distribution is not preset.
No.
The distribution is made by the choices of everyone.
Well, yeah, but
It's probably not
sometimes,
going to be it's going to be a normal distribution no matter what people do, but where's the average going to be? You are part of determining that.
yeah,
This is an important thing like that Peterson says where he goes that I think is a very good piece of advice where he says don't compare yourself to other people today, compare yourself to
who you
yourself
get
yesterday.
today, yeah,
So it's much better to do something like that. It completely reframes the way that you're working, right?
yeah,
Because if you compare yourself to other people today, it's not only going to be something like, oh, it's actually much less likely for most people to be something like, oh, I'll never be good enough as the best people in the world. Most people are going to be, oh, look, I'm doing about as well as everyone else. Yeah, well, you should probably be doing much better than everyone else. You should be striving for much higher things, actually. And if you're comparing yourself to yourself yesterday, then it never ends, and you're always improving.
yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
So don't I when you see the environmental condition stuff, I wouldn't make that the main takeaway from this. The main takeaway is that you're sinful in ways that you don't even understand yet. But that's no excuse to still doing the wrong thing.
Yeah,
That you're gonna need help.
that's correct.
Yeah. Okay, we'll end there.
Yeah. All right.